After my girlfriend cheated on me, I became a multi-millionaire. Just when I was about to transfer my tens of millions of assets to my girlfriend, she said she was getting engaged. In the rental house, she threw the token of love into the toilet. I asked her why. She listened and smiled disdainfully. Michael, what makes you think I would choose you? You don't have a car or a house. Don't hinder my good life. Only David is worthy of me. He will buy me a house, a car, and a bag, but you are just a waste. Later, by accident, I found out that the person she had an affair with was my mother's current boyfriend. If I remember correctly, this guy is millions in debt. The fun starts right away. If you like it, remember to click to subscribe. Listening to what my girlfriend Sophia said, my face was full of disbelief. I have been with her for 7 years, and during these 7 years, I have treated her wholeheartedly. Never had a quarrel with her. In order to prevent her from suffering with me, I tried my best to fight for the inheritance left to me by my father. But now that she has received the inheritance, she has changed. I looked at her and my eyes felt a little hot. You want to break up with me? Sophia laughed out loud when she heard what I said. Why? Do you really think I want to marry you? What a wild idea. After saying that, she pushed me away and walked out the door. When she reached the door, she received a phone call, calling for her baby. If I remember correctly, we have been together for so many years and she always calls me by my first name. I thought she didn't like those ambiguous names. Now that I think about it, I just don't deserve it. Taking a deep breath, I called my father's assistant. I have taken over the Shirtai Group. Come back and help me with some things. Shirtai Group is my father's life's work and is also the largest developer in Jiangqing. After my father passed away unexpectedly, my relatives took over the Shirtai Group for me on the grounds that I was still young. Now, it's time to return it. After dealing with the matter of the Shirtai Group, I received a call from Sophia. On the other end of the phone, she sounded drunk and her voice was choked. Michael, I miss you, can you come pick me up? Hearing this, I clenched my fists tightly. After 7 years of love, it's impossible to say that we don't love each other anymore. When I heard Sophia's voice, her image filled my mind. Seeing that I didn't say anything, she continued. Michael, I need you. I bit my lip and finally said the words. Where are you? I'll pick you up. However, as soon as I opened the door of the box, I was greeted by a burst of laughter. Sophia, you're right, this liquor is really here. Sophia listened, her expression full of pride. The look he gave me was full of provocation. Since you're here, would you like to have a drink? I froze in place, frowning. Are you kidding me? As soon as the words fell, she immediately picked up. With a brain like yours, don't you deserve to be fooled? I just got a phone call. What can I achieve? When her best friend heard what she said, she burst into laughter again. Sophia, it has to be you. All the men are attracted to you. If you ask me, you shouldn't break up with him. This kind of dog is good to keep for use. Sophia picked up the red wine glass and glanced at me calmly. I'm tired of playing. Just want to change the taste. Even if I don't want this kind of dog, he will still lick my face to please me. As she said that, she stood up, walked over to me and patted my shoulder. My engagement party is tomorrow, you must come. After saying that, she walked straight out the door. Got into a luxury car. Through the window, I saw a big hand moving on her body. The man in the car was the gigolo that my mother kept. Before I could recover, an indescribable sound came from inside the car. Even the car began to shake. It didn't end until half an hour later. Seeing this scene, I still feel a little uncomfortable in my heart. Until now, I still remember what Sophia told me personally, that I should save my first time for after marriage. So in the next few years, no matter how uncomfortable I felt, I would not touch her at all. Now it seems that I am just a joke. I looked at the two people in the car and suddenly smiled. Sophia could have found anyone else but the one my mother kept. My mother is notoriously unreasonable. It would be funny if my mom knew Sophia stole her man. The next day, I went to Sophia's engagement party. But before she even stepped into the hotel, she was stopped by her best friend. Hey, isn't this Michael? What? Still can't forget about our Sophia? I advise you to give up this idea as soon as possible. Sophia doesn't like you. I ignored him and prepared to continue walking inside, but someone tripped me on purpose. The moment I fell, a group of people immediately gathered around me, waiting to laugh at me. Sophia's best friend even showed off her acting skills and said bad things about me in front of a group of people. He is just a mistress. He knew Sophia had a boyfriend, but he still harassed her. It's because Sophia is rich. Look, Sophia is getting engaged, and he followed her directly to the hotel. I think he just wants to extort money. People like this should be kicked out. Others heard this and started to point fingers at me. Some people even got started directly. I stood up immediately and was about to retort when Sophia's parents arrived. Her parents looked at me with no favorable expressions. What are you doing here? It's unlucky. Get out now. Don't disturb my daughter's good time. Sophia's father turned his head, his face full of anger. I almost laughed out loud when I saw this scene. Sophia and I had been together for 7 years, and for 5 of those years, I sent money to her parents every month. Just because she said that it was not easy for her parents to raise her. In the past 5 years, her parents have said more than once that Sophia is so lucky to have met me, and that they will definitely treat me as their own son. But now that Sophia has cheated on him, they are like different people. That's ridiculous. I looked at Sophia's parents and said through gritted teeth, "You know better than anyone what your daughter did." Having said this, I walked straight towards the hall. I heard a burst of abuse behind me, but at this point, I didn't care anymore. In the hall, Sophia saw me and walked up to me holding David's hand. Although David is my mother's kept gigolo, we have never met him. I know him because my mother accidentally saw him when she was video chatting with him. David looked at me and immediately put on a haughty attitude. "Sophia, this is your ex-boyfriend? How poor." Sophia smiled and nodded, then crossed her arms over her chest with a look of disdain on her face. "Michael, one of the waiters is on leave today, so it's just right that you're here. Go serve the dishes. If you do it well, I'll give you 10,000 yuan. Before I could speak, David spoke first. "Sophia, are the dishes he touched as a waiter still edible?" Sophia listened and pretended to think for a moment. "You reminded me." Then she pointed at me and said, "Then you can be a cleaner. If you clean up the place, I'll give you 20,000. Seeing that I didn't say anything, David thought I was tempted. 20,000, that's half a year's salary, right? Well, once you've cleaned up, I'll introduce you to the Shirtai group as a cleaner. At least it's a face-saving thing to say." After saying this, he was about to leave when Sophia's girlfriends came up to him. Everyone looked at me with provocation in their eyes. Brother David is really capable. He was able to enter the Shirtai group. There are so many well-known and influential people in it. Yeah, for someone like Michael, being a cleaner is a good option for him. When David heard this, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but rise. After all, I am also a project leader in the Shirtai group, so I can still help with this. As soon as he finished speaking, others looked at him with envy. Including Sophia's parents. They stood on either side of David like two servants. "David, my daughter will be in your care from now on. She will be happy with you." Now when I hear this, I just want to laugh. They told me the same thing 5 years ago. I looked at Sophia's parents and asked, "He is so capable, why doesn't he even want to give a dowry for the engagement?" "I'm afraid not, just pretend to be rich." As soon as these words came out, David's expression changed instantly. "What nonsense are you talking about? I am now the project leader of the Shirtai group, with an annual salary of hundreds of thousands. Do you think I am like you? You earn less than a fraction of what I do in a year." Sophia followed suit. "You're just saying the grapes are sour. David and I have already obtained our marriage certificate. It's none of your business to interfere in our affairs. Michael, stop embarrassing yourself here and go sweep the floor." After saying that, she smiled contemptuously and left. The crowd also dispersed. I looked at their backs and quickly took out my phone to take a picture. Just a picture of the back might not be enough to impact my mother. We have to wait a little longer. There is still 1 hour left until the engagement ceremony. I took this opportunity to call my assistant. Asked about David. It turned out that my mother forced him in there. They didn't agree with my mother and kept making trouble. I had no choice but to give him a position first. When I heard the assistant's words, I sneered in my heart. Before hanging up the phone, I specifically reminded my assistant that David had booked a wedding banquet and asked him to bring his colleagues along to offer his blessings. After hanging up the phone, I ran into Sophia's best friend on the way back. When she saw me, she started to sneer at me again. "Hey, why hasn't the cleaner gone to sweep the floor yet?" I glanced at her and ignored her. The engagement banquet began, and the two exchanged rings and said their vows on the stage. I stood in the audience and recorded the whole process. Sent it to my mom. Unfortunately, David saw me filming the video, and as soon as the engagement process was over, he hurriedly snatched my phone away. It seems that he is guilty. I deliberately raised my voice in front of everyone. "Why did you snatch my phone? Are you afraid that others will see that you are engaged?" David looked guilty, but his mouth remained firm. You are so self-righteous. It's so unlucky to be photographed by you. Sophia came over and raised her hand to hit me. I grabbed her hand and said, Sophia, why are you so desperate to become a mistress? After these words were spoken, everyone looked embarrassed. The one who reacted the most was still David. After all, he was caught with something. When he heard this, he was about to hit me, but at that moment, the assistant came. Before I took over the company, I was always an assistant in charge of all the company's affairs, big and small. David should know him. When he saw the assistant, he instantly lost his momentum. He walked in front of the assistant, bending over with his hands respectfully placed in front of him. Assistant, why are you here? The assistant smiled and said, the boss said you were getting engaged, so we came to share in your good fortune. When David heard the word boss, he was stunned for a moment. Boss, the boss of Shirtai Group? The assistant immediately responded, yes. David felt much more proud when he heard this answer. Boss, you value me so much? After saying this, he turned towards me again. Michael, if you apologize to me now, I might be able to plead for you and ask the boss to hire you as a cleaner. However, the next second, the assistant spoke. He pulled David away. Michael is the boss of Shirtai Group. When David heard this, he hesitated several times and his hands stopped in midair. After a long while, he stammered, he? Is he the boss of the Shirtai Group? Sophia had the same reaction as David, but she still held on to a glimmer of hope. Impossible, how could he be the boss of Shirtai Group? I've been with him for 7 years, how could I not know? He is just a poor fellow. With Sophia's words, David hesitated and thought for a moment. He seemed to believe what Sophia said. Michael, you don't have to spend money to buy actors if you want to be a boss, right? If you don't have the strength, don't force yourself. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a burst of laughter all around. I looked at David and laughed too. Seeing me smile, he was stunned for a moment. Why are you laughing? You poor bastard. I didn't respond, but just walked up to the assistant. Let's complete David's resignation procedures today. The assistant listened, nodded, and then called the Human Resources Department. David, who was gloating on the side, was so frightened when he saw this situation that his face turned pale. Even when he spoke, his voice trembled. Manager Zhang, is he really the boss? Is there something wrong? He is just a poor guy, how can he be the boss of Shirtai Group? When the assistant heard this, he shook his head helplessly. You've been fired. This has nothing to do with you anymore. I will go to the company tomorrow and take your things away. When David heard the word dismissal, he was terrified. Manager Zhang, I was wrong, please don't fire me. The assistant stepped back and said, it was President Michael's idea to fire you. It has nothing to do with me. David knelt in front of me without any hesitation. President Michael, I was wrong. I was blind. Please, give me a chance. I will definitely work hard in the future. Sophia saw this and her face was full of confusion. After all, in her eyes, David is a rich second generation with endless money, and coming out to work is just a way to experience life. But she didn't know that all the money for David came from my mother. It's just that what my mother gave was not enough, so he owed millions. This job is just to pay off debts. However, now that he has lost his job, he will naturally not have a good ending. Sophia looked at David, frowning. David, you are so rich, so what if you get fired? You can start your own company. Maybe your company will be no worse than Shirtai by then. As soon as this was said, others followed suit. But David's face looked extremely ugly. Don't talk, shut up. As he said this, he glared at Sophia, then gave me a pleading look. President Michael, I was wrong. You can punish me however you want, but please don't fire me. I pretended not to hear and turned to look at Sophia. Sophia, don't you know that David owes millions? I don't know if he is supported by someone else. I wonder if he has other women besides you. With every word I said, Sophia's expression became more shocked. Seeing her reaction, I felt a lot better. She trembled and slowly turned to David. Is everything he said true? David, why do you do this to me? Even though the truth has been exposed, David still refuses to admit it. He knelt on the ground and shook his head frantically. No, Sophia, he's making up rumors. He just can't stand seeing us doing well. Don't believe his lies. How could I have another woman? From the beginning to the end, you are the only one I have, and I don't owe you any money. Otherwise, how could I use the money to buy you jewelry and bags? You have to believe me. Sophia, you're right. I'm so rich. If I lose my job, it's gone. I don't care at all. I just want to be with you. When I heard David's words, I burst into laughter. Who just said that if you don't have the ability, don't force it? That's ridiculous. But what's even more ridiculous is that Sophia actually believed his lies. She hugged David and snuggled into his arms. Okay, I believe you. Why didn't I realize before that the woman I loved for 7 years looked like this? How shameful. Before I could say anything, my mother came. The moment David saw my mother, his legs went limp with fear. Ava, why are you here? My mother didn't respond, but just stared at him all the way. When she walked in front of David, she raised her hand and slapped him without any hesitation. The next second, his cheeks turned red and swollen. Sophia was so frightened when she saw this that she covered her mouth with her hands. The voice was also a little choked. David, who is this? Didn't you say you didn't cheat? You lied to me? But the response she got was not from David, but from my mother. You are the mistress, right? Dare to seduce my boyfriend? How shameless. After she finished speaking, she raised her hand and slapped Sophia again. Sophia covered her face, looked at David tremblingly, and asked him why. David didn't even dare to look Sophia in the eye. After all, his lie had been exposed. No matter what he said now, no one would believe him. Seeing David's reaction, Sophia raised her hand and slapped him a few more times. David, why do you do this to me? Why? So what Michael just said is true. David was too scared to speak and just nodded slightly. When the relatives nearby saw such a big melon, they all took out their mobile phones to take videos. Some even started live broadcast. Sophia was about to leave, and David quickly stood up and held Sophia back. Sophia, don't go, don't leave me alone. I need you. The one I love has always been you. He said this with a pleading look in his eyes. When my mother saw this, she became furious. Grabbed David's hair. Well, you're still thinking about this little vixen at this time. Don't forget who gave you the money. Who bought your car? You ungrateful bastard. Forget it, I can easily find someone like you. David, let's break up. Seeing my mother was about to leave, David knelt down and crawled to my mother's feet, begging humbly. Ava, don't go. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I didn't mean it, don't break up with me. This David is ridiculous. It's come to this, and you still want both. But my mother is very straightforward and will never regret what she has said. She remained indifferent to David's apology. He just patted his trouser legs in disgust, said get out, and left without looking back. When Sophia saw that my mother had left, she also walked away. David was left kneeling on the ground alone, feeling hopeless. Seeing this result, I was very satisfied. They brought all this upon themselves. Look at the time, it's noon, time to eat. But as soon as I walked out of the hall, Sophia blocked my way. She stood in front of me. At this moment, she had completely lost the momentum she had just now, and was replaced by timidity. I didn't stop, but just glanced at her lightly. When I was about to get in the car, she stopped me. I turned around and looked at her with disgust in my eyes. What's up? Sophia swallowed and held the corner of my clothes tightly. After a long while, he slowly opened his mouth. Michael, let's make peace? I know I was wrong. Hearing this, I suddenly laughed. Before she could react, I shook her hand away and sat in the passenger seat. Sophia looked at my reaction with horror in her eyes. She was saying something heart-wrenchingly outside the car, but I didn't hear a word. All this must finally end. Without Sophia, life is much more relaxed. I don't have to live in fear every day, worrying that I might have done something wrong and made her angry. There is no need to blame yourself all day long and waste time. David has also been fired. I have no idea where he went. I only occasionally heard the assistant say that David was beaten by debt collectors again. The house and the car were taken back by my mother. I have no ability and can't find a job. Hiding from debt every day. He deserves all this. And Sophia has been following David for so long, but has gained nothing. She was so glamorous before because I supported her. Now that we've broken up, she has no money left. She may have thought about continuing to look for a boyfriend. But the video of her and David's engagement had already gone viral on the internet. All the things she did were exposed by netizens. Nowadays, she would be pointed at if she just went out to buy vegetables, let alone having a boyfriend. Even her parents were implicated. As soon as the neighbors saw them, they started to talk about them and never said a good word. Looking at Sophia's current condition, I feel a lot more relieved. Because David was fired, the company hired a new person. But I didn't expect it was an acquaintance. Abigail, my class monitor in college. She was very beautiful and many men pursued her in college. During class, boys from the next class would come to the teacher and ask for her contact information. But she never gave it to me, saying that she already had someone she liked. I never expected that the person she liked would be me. On the day of her graduation from college, she said she had something to talk to me about. I thought it was a class matter and didn't think much about it. But when I went there, what was waiting for me was a love letter. It was an evening, with a cool breeze, and she handed the love letter to me, speaking in a low voice. "Michael, I like you." At that moment, my mind went blank. I admit that I also think the monitor is good-looking. But I never liked her at all. Although a direct rejection is cruel, it is the best option compared to not giving a clear answer. I didn't accept the love letter. I took a step back and spoke somewhat awkwardly. "I'm sorry, but I don't have any plans to fall in love right now. We haven't seen each other since then. So it was a bit of a surprise to see her today." When I saw her for the first time, I was stunned for a moment, but she was the first to greet me. "Michael." Coming back to my senses, I nodded quickly. "Abigail, what a coincidence." She walked up to me in high heels and raised the corners of her mouth. "After so many years, are you married?" I took a sip of water and responded, "No." "It's time for dinner, do you want to eat together?" "Okay, I'll treat you since we haven't seen each other for so many years." Abigail smiled and nodded, but said nothing. However, when we got downstairs and were chatting happily, we met Sophia. After not seeing her for a few days, she had become much shabbier and looked haggard. When she saw me, she rushed towards me like crazy. "Michael, who is this?" As she said this, she reached out and grabbed Abigail. But before she could touch Abigail, I grabbed her arm. "What are you doing?" I slammed her aside. She staggered a few steps and seemed like she would fall to the ground in the next second. "Michael, we just broke up and you're looking for another woman? Didn't you say you would love me forever?" "I don't allow it. You can only love me, you can't be with others." Hearing her words, I snorted coldly, not intending to pay attention to her, and prepared to leave with Abigail. But as soon as I took the first step, Sophia rushed over and grabbed my leg tightly. "You are not allowed to leave. I'm already pregnant with your child. You have to be responsible for me." When I heard this, my pupils shrank suddenly. "Child?" Sophia immediately pulled out a pregnancy test form from her bag. The report showed that the child was 3 months pregnant. But I have never touched her, so you can imagine whose child this is. I glanced down at Abigail and said coldly, "Roll. If you don't leave, I'll have to call the police." When Sophia heard the word "call the police," she suddenly covered her head with her hands, her face full of pain. He kept repeating to himself not to call the police. But the next second, she stood up instantly and rushed towards Abigail. Before I could react, blood began to seep out of Abigail's abdomen. "Sophia, there's a knife in hand. She is crazy." I rushed forward quickly and kicked Sophia away. She fell to the ground, grinning at the ground alone. I glared at her and called an ambulance. Abigail clutched her abdomen tightly and collapsed on me. I immediately picked her up and ran towards the company gate. She lay in my arms, her face pale and beads of sweat continued to appear on her forehead. "Abigail, Abigail." I kept calling her name, hoping she would stay awake. She leaned on my shoulder and spoke softly in my ear. "Michael, I still like you." I looked down at her and said, "Let's go to the hospital first." In the ambulance, Abigail held my hand tightly and didn't let go until she was pushed into the operating room. As soon as Abigail entered the operating room, the police called me. Asked me to come over and find out what happened. As soon as I arrived at the police station, I saw Sophia wearing silver handcuffs and her mouth was trembling. Seeing me, she walked over to me with a smile. "Michael, that woman, is she dead? If she dies, can you be with me? Don't worry, I will love you well in the future." I stood there and clenched my fists. If this wasn't a police station, I would never tolerate it. I ignored him and walked straight into the room. Just after I told the police what happened, Sophia's parents came. As soon as the two saw me, they knelt in front of me with sad faces. "Michael, you're a good boy. Please, forgive Sophia, okay? We just went to the hospital to ask the doctor, the girl's life is not in danger. You don't know, Sophia has gone crazy since that day, acting crazy all day long. I keep repeating your name every day. Since you've been together for so long, can you please forgive her and not hold her responsible? We only have one daughter, and she's so young. Please." Sure enough, the whole family has the same habit. Who can change their faces faster? They were insulting me together some time ago, but now they are in trouble and come to beg me again. It's so ridiculous. I shook off their hands and said through gritted teeth, "I'm not the one you should apologize to. It's Abigail." After saying this, I left. In the hospital, Abigail was still in a coma due to excessive blood loss. In the following days, I didn't go to the company and stayed in the hospital to take care of Abigail. Having known her for so many years, this is the first time I realize that she and I have so many topics to talk about donors. I always feel at ease when chatting with her. Fortunately, Abigail recovered well after the operation and was discharged from the hospital in half a month. It was only when I sent her home that I found out that she was sharing the house with someone else. The person she shared the apartment with was a middle-aged man. Abigail hadn't been home for half a month, and the house was a mess. I pulled Abigail, "How long have you lived here?" Abigail smiled disapprovingly, "Almost a year. I have an empty room there, how about you move in?" As soon as she finished speaking, Abigail's eyes became redder. "Thank you, Michael. Abigail's move-in has really added a lot of fun to my life." Gradually, I got used to her integrating into my life. On my birthday, Abigail confessed her love to me again. But this time I didn't reject her, but just hugged her in my arms. Whispered in her ear, "Thank you, Abigail." She didn't say anything, but I felt wetness on my shoulder. She cried. The next day when I went to the company, I met Sophia's parents. They came to apologize. Because they couldn't afford the compensation we asked for. As for Sophia, she was also put into a mental hospital. Abigail was moved when she heard this and was about to speak, but I spoke first. "Don't even think about paying less than a penny of compensation. If you can't produce it, call the police." They wanted to beg for mercy, but I had already called security and had them kicked out. Abigail looked at me and smiled. I hugged her, my face full of happiness. "I won't let you suffer any injustice." When I arrived at the company, the employees saw me hugging Abigail and immediately started to make a noise. "President Michael, when will you invite us to your wedding?" I thought about it for a moment. Of course we should ask Abigail about such an important matter. Abigail covered her mouth shyly. "Everyone is welcome to attend Michael and I's wedding on the 20th of next month." The wedding was held as scheduled, and 1 month after the wedding, we had our own child. I am very satisfied with everything now.